What is up? So today I wanted to do a TCG deck profile. This is for the Tearalaments deck. Tearalaments. I don't really know how it's supposed to be pronounced exactly, but generally they will change the name to an official English translation. This is just an unofficial one. So Tearalaments is what we're going with for now. This is a fusion-based archetype that has a very high level of interactivity during your opponent's turn and can pull off some really crazy, unexpected stuff. It's coming out in Power of the Elements, which is coming out, I believe, in August of this year in the TCG. You can always test these decks before they're released at EDO Pro. So the one that I'm using right now is the deck profile from Lithium 2300. You can check out his channel. He has videos on this deck as well. But I wanted to give my own thoughts and show some replays from my end. I think this deck is pretty insane. So basically, the deck has one main water monster for the archetype, and the rest of them are darks. So the water one is basically a foolish. He'll send one of the other Tearalaments from deck to graveyard, and then for the dark ones, when they're sent to the graveyard, they allow you to fusion summon by shuffling materials from your graveyard, field, or hand into the deck / extra deck. And there's no restrictions on what you can fusion summon, so you can literally fusion summon anything, as we'll get into when we talk about the extra deck. And each of them have a hard once per turn on that fusion, so that means you can do it up to 3 times with these cards. And then each of them have, so that second effect is the same between all of the dark monsters. But the first effect is different from each of them. So you have Shaylin. During your main phase, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, send one monster from your hand to the graveyard, then send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So they all involve kind of milling your deck, because you get advantage off of doing that, since if any of these are sent to the graveyard by a card effect specifically, then you can use their effects to fusion summon, of course. So Shaylin lets you get your combo started without using your normal summon, as long as you have another monster in hand to send, so it's nice. Rhinoheart I just went over, it's the water one that you generally are going to be normal summoning. And you have Halfenis. This one is especially broken because you can use it during your opponent's turn, even if they're going first, since it is a quick effect. So when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So the implications of this are, say your opponent's going first, and they normal summon Alistair and activate his effect. You can chain Halfenis if you have it in your hand. Then you can special summon it, and then mill 3 cards. And then if you mill any of these, including another copy of itself, you can use their effective fusion summon during your opponent's turn, on turn 1, which is really, really insane. As you'll see, you can just put a stop to their turn if you mill pretty well. Even if you don't mill particularly well, you can use materials in your hand. So the chances of you disrupting them in some way are very high, so you can apply a lot of pressure early on. Then you have Meru. If it's normal or special summon, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. It works as a normal summon, though it's not the best one. But you definitely want to max out on all of these copies, obviously, because when you mill, there's an element of randomness. Think of it kind of like Adamantimators. So you want to maximize your chances of milling one of them, and then you can fusion summon. Then you have Mare of the Shore. I'm not sure if this card is also coming out in Power of the Elements, but it's not technically a Tearalaments card, but when you normally special summon it, you can send an Aqua monster from your deck to the graveyard, which is all of these are. So except the Rhinoheart. So it kind of works as 2 additional copies of Rhinoheart, which adds some consistency to the deck. So I do think it's good to play definitely at least 1, I don't know. The ratios are also not solved yet, obviously, since this deck isn't even out. We have King of the Swamp. This card, although it's like pretty old, it feels like it was made for this deck because it's a water aqua. You can search polymerization and also use it to as a specific name. If you want to go until like invoke Caliga, you can treat it as Alistair the Invoker, even if it's in, regardless of whether it's in your hand, field, or graveyard. Shadal Beast. This is a way to get into Winda, as you'll see. There's an argument, obviously, for playing more than one Shadal. You can play Squamata. I've seen deck lists running Windy or even aerial. I'm not sure what the optimal ratio is for those yet, but currently I've been trying it with 1 and it seems to be working nicely. 2 copies of Destiny Hero Malicious. While I don't like playing bricks in this deck, Beatrice is so good in this deck. Like, if you summon Beatrice, you pretty much just win the game. So I think it's probably worth at least experimenting with. You'll basically, since you can fusion summon into any fusion monster, as long as you get one of your Malleys in your hand or graveyard, you can go into Dangerous, then you use Dangerous to mill a Malley, summon the other Malley, then overlay into Beatrice. And that puts you in a very, very strong position. Rhoda, that gets you to Rhino Heart. This one's a warrior, although the other the other tier element monsters are Aqua. This one happens to be a warrior. Then we have Perleno, the primal. Let's just call it the field spell. Although doesn't have tier elements in the name, I think this is intentional because they didn't want it to be searchable. Off of, I think it was Kit Kalos, because the card is very powerful. So they didn't put tier elements in the name, but it does search tier elements monsters. You definitely want to play 3 of this plus terraforming, because it lets you search any of your tier elements monsters. So it lets you start your combos off of just this one card. Furthermore, if a tier elements monster is returned from your field or graveyard to the deck and or extra deck, you can pop 1 card on the field. This is obviously increases the pressure on your opponent by a lot, but you can use it to pop your own monsters, since they have effects when they're sent to the graveyard by a card effect, and that comes up fairly often. This card is really, really good. 2 Polymerization. I think playing Poly in this deck is amazing as well. With how many effects you get that when they're sent to the graveyard, you can chain block and make it very hard for your opponent to disrupt you. There's really no good times sometimes, depending on if you have a decent hand. Your opponent will really struggle to interrupt you. Then the 1 Terraforming is a 4th copy of Field Spell. It's pretty obvious. Called by to stop any potential interruptions. Instant Fusion. This one, since these happen to be level 5, this one, Kit Kalos, that can also function as a combo starter, so Instant Fusion is definitely good. I might cut one of these to play 1 Millenniumize Restrict as well, as a way of stopping hand traps. You can also hard summon Millenniumize Restrict, because it requires just Relinquished plus 1 effect monster. So King of the Swamp can be treated as Relinquished, and then any of these tier elements can be used as the effect monster, which is really awesome. So I might probably do that. Then you have a regular normal trap and a continuous trap. So I'm playing 3 of these currently, or Lithium is. This is Lithium's deck list, as I said. I'm playing 3 of these, maximizes your chance of milling one of them, which is good because they each have an effect on being sent to the graveyard by the card effect. But first let's talk about their normal effect. So for the normal trap card, it books one of your opponent's monsters, changes it to face down defense position, and then you send 1 tier elements monster from your deck to the graveyard. So you both disrupt your opponent and you get to send one of these to begin fusion summoning. So it generates a lot of advantage. And then if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add one of your tier elements monsters in your graveyard to your hand, which also comes in handy. The continuous trap is really, really broken, though. If you control a tier elements monster, you can target 1 effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects permanently, then send 1 monster you control to the graveyard. So yeah, I don't think I need to explain why that's broken. It permanently negates their effects. It's searchable off of Kit Kalos. And then you can also send one of your tier elements monsters to the graveyard intentionally to activate their floating effect. So this one also generates a lot of advantage, and then if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, it searches the tier elements monster. So yeah, this card is absolutely insane. Definitely want to play 3 of this. There's also a counter trap. I haven't tried this one yet. It seems pretty good. It negates spell / trap card or monster effect. You do have to send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard though, so that could be a little problematic because you aren't going to have that many left in your hand by the time you end your combos. So it could be a problem, but it is obviously a very good counter trap. Being a Bureau, this makes sense because nibbing your own monsters doesn't hurt much at all. In fact, it can help you because you're sending them to the graveyard by a card effect, of course. Droplet, obviously it's not the greatest when you're discarding cards already, but I think it's necessary to have it in this format when your opponent will be summoning stuff like Guardian Chimera, Mirror Blade. Yeah, you just need a way to dodge those and negate them. Now we can go into the extra deck. We have one Guardian Chimera. This is going to come up when you have Poly. This will only come up when you have Poly because you can't fusion summon it using materials in your graveyard, so you can't summon it off of any of these effects. But it's very good. It lets you draw its cards and destroy your opponent's cards. Self-explanatory. I think we all know what this card does by now. Let's do the non-archetype fusions first. Maybe we should do the archetype. Let's do the archetype fusions first. Sorry. Kip Kalos. So this is generally the one you're going to try to go into first. It's a level 5 fusion. Just requires one Tearalaments monster plus one Aqua monster. So very easy to summon. If you just mill one of them, I mean, you're good to go. Then if you special summon it, you can search any Tearalaments card or send it to the graveyard. So you have the choice whether to search one of these traps, for example, or send one of your monsters to fusion summon some more. Then it has another effect, which is really crazy, which is you can target one of your monsters that you control, including itself. Special summon a Tearalaments monster from your hand or graveyard, and if you do, send the targeted monster to the graveyard. So you can use that to activate its own effect, which is that if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can mill 5 cards. The chance of you hitting one of these is very high off of milling 5. That comes up pretty often. Then you have Kaleido Heart. This one is the boss monster for the archetype. It requires Tearalaments Reino Heart plus 2 Aqua monsters. So you need to have specifically this card. However, you can also use King of the Swamps since it can imitate one of the names, or sorry, a monster that's named specifically on it. So you can treat it as Tearalaments Reino Heart, and then you just need 2 other Aqua monsters. So this card is special summoned or an Aqua monster is sent to your graveyard by card effect while this card is on the field. You can target one card your opponent controls and shuffle it into the deck. So this is a great form of interruption, like a Nightmare Unicorn, that you can kind of activate at will on your opponent's turn by using some of these other cards. This is very powerful. That's self-explanatory. And also, if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, this is even crazy. You special summon it, and then if you do, send one Tearalaments card from your deck to the graveyard. So like a combo that I really like to have is having the continuous trap plus the level 9 fusion. That's very difficult for your opponent to deal with, because it's a permanent monster negate. So you target one of your opponent's effects monsters, negate it. Then you can send your level 9 to the graveyard. And then once your level 9 is sent by a card effect, you can activate it, resummon it, send one of your Tearalaments monsters to the graveyard, then fusion summon, and also shuffle one of your opponent's monsters back into the deck. All in one move. This is amazing. Yeah, this card is broken. And we have Dragostapelia. This is very easy to summon, and also one of the easiest things you can summon during your opponent's turn with Halfennis. And it is a monster negate, so it's good to have. I like to play 2, because if one of yours gets outed, you can always summon the other one by using the original one as fusion material. Destiny Hero Dangerous, I kind of alluded to this before. Since it's a level 6, you can use it to send Malicious, get another Malicious, and then overlay into Beatrice. Then we have Winda. Obviously a big pain in the butt for your opponent to deal with, especially if you make it during their turn. So I think Winda's a no-brainer in this deck. Caligar, similar reasons. Basically the same thing. They're like complements of each other. Then you have Beatrice. Since Beatrice sends any card from your deck to the graveyard as quick effect, it's one of the best cards in your extra deck. And definitely want to try to get to it when you can. That'll let you get to Winda. It's a 1-card window. So if you summon Beatrice, you can send a Beast during your turn, and then during your opponent's turn, send any of your Tearalaments monsters, and then fusion into Winda. Or Caliga, because you can send King of the Swamp. So yeah, this card by itself applies an insane amount of pressure. Bahamut Shark, you are playing a couple level 4 water monsters. You don't get to make this card too often, unfortunately, which is kind of a weakness of the deck, because it doesn't have like hard negates. It has like Dragostapelia is kind of a negate on field, but Totally Awesome is the only actual like true negate it has, unless you play the counter trap. So unfortunately this doesn't come up too much, but I think it's still worth playing, because Totally Awesome is a great card. And then Time Thief Redoer. This card is important. I think it's mandatory in this deck, because it's one of those Xyz monsters that detaches its materials for effect rather than cost. So like most Xyz monsters, like Beatrice for example, will detach for cost. But the fact that Time Thief Redoer detaches for effect means that when you detach one of your Tearalaments monsters, like Shaylin, well, that's the only relevant one here because it's level 4, it counts as being sent to the graveyard by a card effect. So you can actually activate its effect, Diffusion Summon. And that comes up very often if you're getting like hand trapped. It's a great card to have, and then also is pretty annoying to deal with because you can steal your opponent's cards. If you steal like a trap card from the top of their deck, you have a non-targeting bounce. So it's also kind of functions as a boss monster. I think this deck is really, really crazy. I think the meta is going to change a lot. There's going to be decks like Splite, which I'll probably be doing a video on later. Tearalaments, and there's going to be Mr. Rune. All kinds of new stuff. So it's going to be pretty exciting. Hopefully this deck won't be too expensive, but that's copium. It's definitely going to be expensive. Especially if you're playing this guy who's at like 65 and climbing at the moment. That's all I got for the deck profile. I think it's kind of hard to explain in just words. You kind of have to see it in action for yourself. So let's hop into the replays. As always, we have the game plan going first. So I'm going to start with the field spell. I'm going to go with Shaylin's because it gets your combo started without using your normal summon. So if I get interrupted on this, I can always normal summon Reno and then continue from there. So let's continue. So I happened to not mill any of the Tearalaments monsters, which is pretty unlucky. So I do have to normal summon Reno. So I send Halfenis to use its effective fusion summon. My opponent drops Gamma here, which makes sense, kind of. It would have been better to use it on this, definitely. But there's always risk. I should have used Terraforming earlier. I don't know why I just kind of zoned out. You should definitely do that because you don't want to mill your field spell. You want it in your hand. So that was kind of a misplay. So now I'm going to go into Redoer. This kind of shows why you play Redoer. You detach. You make sure to detach Shaylin for effect. So now it was sent to the graveyard by a card effect. You can fuse it into your level 5. Now you can search any of your Tearalaments cards. I choose to search the normal trap. I'm going to use its effect to send itself to the graveyard to special summon. Now you can mill 5. There's a very good chance that you hit at least one card there. And I do. I hit 3. So I use the trap to add back 1. And then I fusion summon into Dragostapelia. That's 1 interruption. This board is kind of deceptively powerful. Because although it just looks like there's 1 interruption, this trap will allow me to get to more. My opponent is also playing one of the new decks, so I use Redoer to steal. I get Imperm, which is awesome because that's a bounce. He's playing whatever it's called, Scareclaw. Okay, so since I have Halfenis in my hand, you can see that I can use this one during my opponent's turn. You can see I activated a monster effect on the field. So now I mill. I hit 1, which is great. Better than 0. Now I go into the level 9. Which is a disruption. And then the field spell activates, allowing me to pop his Tsuchinoko as well. So I clear his board completely. And I still haven't even used my trap or Dragostapelia. So now I use Redoer, bounce. And my opponent scoops. Yeah. It's pretty insane. Now let's show the game plan going second. My opponent's playing Dragon Link. This is me. Let me swap. Okay. So he goes into Red MD, and I have Halfenis in my hand, which means I can now activate it. So now I mill. I do happen to mill 2 names, so I could fusion summon. So now I go into the level 5. And I go into Dangerous to set up Beatrice for next turn. Now I can send 1 more to the graveyard with the Fusion's effect. Since I haven't used Meru yet, I do that. And I go into Caliga. So now my opponent is like, oh god. Now he's facing down a Caliga, which means he only gets one more monster effect for the rest of the turn. He gets a Verte, but he doesn't even get to use DPE's effect this turn. This is all during my opponent's turn, by the way. He went first. Haven't even gotten a turn yet, and I did all this. Just like makes you chuckle sometimes at how insane it is. So he bailers this. That makes sense. Sometimes if your opponent doesn't read the card, they'll Ghost Ogre you on it, which is like the worst possible thing they can do, because it actually helps you. It actively helps you for them to do that. So I use Droplet, sending my Caliga, because I want to be able to activate monster effects, just to close the game out. And then I negate his DPE. DPE is like not a threat, of course, as you can imagine. If you pop this, I mill 5 and continue as if nothing happened. Play. So I go into level 9 to bounce back the DPE, then destroy the Verte. Obviously, you don't want to destroy the DPE. So I probably missed lethals in some way, but I'm obviously new to the deck. However, he's in a very bad position. He sends his Ogre, realizing that it's not going to do anything against me, and will actively help me. So as I said, even though I didn't have a Tearalaments to send to the graveyard at that moment, I have the trap card. So I can send the level 9. This is the kind of like the combo I was talking about. So permanent imperm on my opponent's monster. I send the level 9. The level 9 activates to resummon. This triggers both the level 9 and the field spell. And the and the one that I sent off the level 9 spell. Sorry, it doesn't activate the field spell. That happens on the next chain. So I summon Window, and then I activate the field spell. It's like, look at that. That is so absurd. Like, he's done. There's nothing. What can he draw into? And he surrenders. Yep. GG. Here's another good replay. So I go first. And this one, my opponent actually played really well. Pretty much optimally. I don't know if there's anything he could have done better. And it still wasn't enough. Spoiler alert. I go for the level 5. Get some effects off. Drago's Tapelia. And level 9. I always try to get the level 9 out on turn 1 if you can. Because if you get hit by Nib, he just comes right back. My opponent is playing DDD, another deck that I am learning. It's very fun. Difficult to play, but cool. Okay, the only thing he did wrong was do Callboy on the Neb. I don't know why he did that. But yeah, I have Half-Vanis, so I can activate it during his turn. I didn't mill anything off it, I don't think. But I have the normal trap to book the Griffin, so he can't go into Gilgamesh. I'm trying to keep him off that. And then I can activate the level 9's effect to bounce his Copernicus. And then also fusion summon into Drago's Tapelia. But he has a pretty good hand for playing through interruptions, at least. So he goes straight to battle phase, which is probably the correct move, but I have Droplet during damage steps. He goes Ragnarok to revive the fusion. I negate with Drago's Tapelia. It probably wasn't the correct play, because he can go into Genghis and then go into Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is what you want to negate. That's 2 scales. So yeah, my opponent played really well, aside from the random Callboy. So he has an interruption set up. This one can only be activated during his turn, so that's not an interruption. So I go into Chimera, because I can chain block it. So Chimera 1, level 9 Chainlink 2 to shuffle back this. Then Chainlink 3 is going to be Shadal, draw. Chainlink 4, he can't respond because this only responds to monster effects on the field. So there's actually nothing you can do from this point. Gets bounced, completely clears board, and go in for lethal. No TK. Now it's going to be the mirror match. It's going to show off kind of why this is more of a control deck, I would say. I guess it's kind of hard to define what those things mean these days. People use control, combo, mid-range for all kinds of things. But this feels more like a control, at least in this matchup. But it also looks like a combo deck. Who knows? It's a deck. Let's just call it that. Okay, so Beatrice, I'm sending Beast, because now I have Winda set up for next turn. I don't know what my opponent's playing at this point. Now I do. So I'm like pretty confident that Winda's the play. It's going to be difficult. It is possible for this deck to deal with an opponent's Winda. They have like they're able to get to level 9. But it is difficult. So he goes called by on my Kick Kalos, which hurts him kind of also because he's also playing Kick Kalos. So now I tag out Redoer, I detach my own Shaylin so I can activate its Effective Fusion. And then I go into the level 9 and bounce so he can't beat over my window. He tries to pop it, well, it can't be destroyed by an opponent's card effects. So yeah, I do the thing again with the continuous trap. Send my own level 9, bring it back, bounce a card, use its effect to fusion summon. And go like plus 5 off of just that interaction.